This is the City of Saginaw's 2026 proposed budget. Copies of the budget are available in the city clerk's office. It's also available on the City of Saginaw's website. Council sessions are scheduled for Monday, May 5th. Public hearing is scheduled on May 19th, and adoption is expected for May 19th. Emails or citizen comments can be delivered directly to 989-759-1784 or ybland@saginaw-mi.com. Okay, so the 2026 proposed budget continues to reflect our commitment to provide quality services to residents while preserving organizations' long-term viability. The total citywide budget is projected to be $203.77 million. This represents a $30.14 million or 13% decrease from the prior year. The general fund budget for 2026 is projected to be $45.14 million. This represents an increase of $587,822 or roughly 2% from the prior year's approved budget. A general fund budget accounts for approximately 78% of the total citywide budget. The largest changes will be realized in 4 funds. New in fiscal year 25 budget was the State of Michigan Saginaw Medical Facility Fund. The city received the State of Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Development grant in the amount of $30.3 million. This new fund will account for the activities that occur with the development of a medical facility in the city of Saginaw. For fiscal year 26, this fund represents $21.27 million. The next fund that will be affected is the American Rescue Plan Act Fund, which will decrease over $28.92 million. As the City Council has allocated all the ARPA funds, the budget is projected to be $8.6 million, and awardees are still spending these funds, and there will be additional budget adjustments required. The Water Operation and Maintenance Fund decreases $10.38 million, and this reduction is due to a decrease in planned construction projects for the water improvements. The Department of Water and Wastewater Services continues to budget for the elevated storage tank and the lead and copper galvanizing line replacement project. A portion of those expenditures will be offset by federal and state grant funds. And finally, the Sewer Operation and Maintenance Fund decreases a net 11% or $4.11 million. This decrease is directly related to a reduction in the number of construction projects planned during 2026. The 2026 budget also reflects changes to salaries for all employees as City Council approved the collective bargaining agreement in late fiscal year 23. These agreements allow for a 2% across the board increase. The cost of health care benefits also increases for 2026. The projected increase for active health care is roughly 30% and 12% for retiree health care. The city will also experience an increase in several of the internal service funds, such as technical services IS because of the cost of software, the motor pool operations as the cost of motor vehicle supplies and motor vehicle repairs continue to increase, and the self-insurance funds due to increase in insurance rates nationwide. So let's look at our fund types. As you can see, the breakdown of the total $203.77 million is represented in this pie chart. The general fund represents roughly 23% of the total citywide budget. Special revenue funds represents roughly 31% of the total budget. The largest part of the budget is represented in the enterprise funds, which consists of the boat launch fund, sewer and water operation and maintenance funds, and this percentage is roughly 42%. Internal service funds represent 6% of the total budget, and fiduciary funds represent 0.02% of the total budget. The next slide looks at our 5-year millage rate. And as you can see, the total tax levy for 2026 is projected to decrease from fiscal year 25, and this has been a steady reduction since fiscal year 23. For 26, taxes are levied at 13.8365 mils. Moving on to the general fund. The general fund, again, representing roughly 22% of the citywide budget. And as you can see from this chart, the historical city budgets, where in 25, the general fund was $44.56 million, and 26 is $45.14 million. The general fund revenues, starting on page 63 through 78 of the budget document, again, is projected to be $45.14 million. And again, this represents an increase of $587,822, or roughly 2% from the previous years. As in the previous fiscal years, the three major revenue sources for this funds are property taxes, state shared revenue, and income taxes. Property taxes will be approximately $4.2 million for fiscal year 26, and this is approximately 1% or 36,709 increase from the prior year. State shared revenues, representing roughly 25% of the general fund revenues, are projected to be $11.27 million. This is an increase of $787,929 from fiscal year 25. This increase will be realized in additional funds received from the state. Funds are allocated based on taxable values, weighted population, and yield. Income taxes will be $16.55 million for fiscal year 26. This is approximately 8% increase from fiscal year 25. The increase in income tax, which represents approximately 37% of the general fund revenues, primarily due to increases in projected pay rates within the city of Saginaw. Grant revenues for fiscal year 26 are expected to be a net decrease of 16%, or $698,275. Total general fund grant allocation is $3.8 million. And a part of that is your Medicare reimbursements, state fire protection, local community stabilization, police state grants, police federal grants. The decrease in grants is attributed to the completion of the Department of Housing and Urban Development 2023 Community Project Fund allocation. To offset the reduction in general fund grants will be the addition of the State of Michigan Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Grant Funds and the federal allocations to the Department of Justice, Office of Violence Against Women, and Byron Discretionary Community Project Fund grants for community public safety police. License permits and fees will be $2.3 million for fiscal year 26, and this represents a decrease of $13,325. Charge for services are $1.4 million for fiscal year 26. For 26, this category increases roughly 7%, and this increase is due to the additional funds received for the Public Act 425 funds. Fines and forfeitures are expected to decrease $1,550 from the previous fiscal year. And this reduction is due to a slight decrease in the transfer affidavit fines and penalties for the city clerk's office. Interest and rents are expected to be $1.02 million for fiscal year 26. The category of interest and rents revenue will increase $155,920, and this will be found in the interest grouping. This increase in the category is primarily due to recognizing some of the American Rescue Plan Act interest of $150,000 to cover the annual payments of the city's contracted vendor Guidehouse. This was approved by City Council in fiscal year 25. In addition, there will be a slight increase to cemetery endowments and cemetery interest on investments. Reimbursement revenues will be $3.48 million for fiscal year 26. This is a decrease of $211,592. This reduction is associated with a reduction to the indirect cost allocation for the general fund. Other revenues decreased $37,644, or roughly 7%. Total revenues expected is $529,135. The reduction in other revenues is a result of no longer recognizing loan proceeds for the installment contracts as has been done in the previous fiscal years. There will be an operating transfer in from other funds of $92,547. Operating transfers in from other funds consists of the allocation from the Community Development Block Grant for community police officers and the repayment to the general fund from the Boat Launch Fund for the purchase of the kiosk system at the Russ Lee Street Boat Launch. The general fund revenues category decreases $2,130, which is related to the repayment to the general fund from the Boat Launch Fund. 2026 is the last year of the payment. In fiscal year 26, no fund balance will be appropriated. Next, we're moving on to the general fund expenditures. And as you can see, the general fund in 2025 was $44.56 million, and in fiscal year 26 is 45.14. This is a decrease of 587,822. Starting off with the general fund, offices of the general government, and this starts on page 78 through 87. The Office of the General Government, which represents roughly 9% of the total general fund expenditures, consists of the following offices: City Council, City Manager, SGTV, Human Resources, City Clerk and Elections, City Attorney, Office of Management and Budget, and Marketing. The total 26 budget for these offices is projected at $3.8 million. This is an increase from the previous year of $87,473. This increase is due to across-the-board increases in salary and benefits, general liability insurance costs, information management charges, and in the Office of Human Resources, there's an increase in labor professional services, and in the Office of Management and Budget, the contract with Guidehouse is represented. This expenditure is offset by council-approved revenues. On pages 88 to 94, you will find the Department of Fiscal Services. And the Department of Fiscal Services, representing roughly 8% of the total general fund expenditures, will be $3.52 million for fiscal year 26. This is an increase of roughly 4%. The increase is attributed to increases to salary and benefits as well as contracted services. On page 95 to 105, you will find the Community Public Safety Police. And Community Public Safety Police, representing roughly 40% of the total general fund expenditures, will be $18.06 million for fiscal year 26. This is an increase of $1.8 million from the previous year. The personnel complement for Community Public Safety Police is 64 sworn and 25.6 civilian, making a total complement of 89.6 personnel. During fiscal year 25, City Council approved the Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women grant. This adds an additional police officer to the personnel complement for the next 3 years. However, this budget does reflect a reduction in 7 school crossing guards in the patrol division. This reduction is due to the fact that these positions have been vacant for several years and are no longer required due to the closing of several schools. The overall Community Public Safety Police budget increases approximately 11%. This increase is largely due to the city allocating over $1.36 million in state and federal grants. These grants include from the state of Michigan MCOLS grants such as Victoria's Community Development Grant, Victim Services Grant, and HELP Grant. The federal grants included Byron Grant for Kildee, PSN Grant, Byron SIP HELP #1 Grant, and the Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women Grant. In addition, this department will recognize the 2% across-the-board bargaining agreement increases to both active and retiree health care, increases in information management charges, motor pool charges, and general liability insurance premium costs. On pages 106 to 112, you will find the Community Public Safety Fire. Community Public Safety Fire, representing roughly 22% of the total general fund expenditure, equate to $9.95 million for fiscal year 26. This is an increase of $106,927. The personnel complement for Community Public Safety Fire is 41 sworn and 1 civilian, making the total complement of 42. During fiscal year 2025, City Council approved the addition of a community engagement officer for the National Opioid Settlement Fund. 10% of this position is allocated to the general fund, and the remaining 90% is allocated to the National Opioid Settlement Fund. This increase is also attributed to increases in general liability insurance, record management softwares, information management charges, and training and development. The department will also realize salary and active healthcare increases. Retiree healthcare will also increase 12% for the department. On pages 113 to 117, you will find the Department of Neighborhood Services and Inspections. The Department of Neighborhood Services and Inspections, representing roughly 5% of the general fund expenditures, will be $2.36 million for fiscal year 26. This represents an increase of $290,920 from the previous fiscal year's budgeted levels. For 2026, this department will realize an increase to salary and fringe benefits of 2 code enforcement officers, that were reallocated to the inspections divisions. These positions once were paid out of the Community Development Block Grant Fund. In addition, 10% of salaries and fringe benefits of 2 environmental enforcement officers have been allocated to the parking operations for the care of parking lots. These positions are shared with the Rubbish Collection Fund Environmental Improvement Division. On page 118 to 129, you will find the Department of Public Services General Fund. The General Fund Department of Public Services, representing roughly 11% of the General Fund budget, will be $5.02 million. This is a decrease of $1.77 million. This decrease is largely due to the completion of the Department of Housing and Urban Development 2023 Community Project Grant Fund. To offset this reduction will be increases to the salary and fringe benefits, as well as the costs associated with the McDonald Ford Municipal Buyback Program and replacing features at Celebration Park Splash Pad. The department will continue to pay debt service payments in 2026. On page 130, you will find the other general fund expenditures. Other general fund expenditures, representing roughly 5% of the general fund expenditures, will be $2.4 million for fiscal year 26. This is a 2% decrease from the previous fiscal year. The general fund expenditure type is inclusive of retiree health care, unemployment, Saginaw Housing Commission retiree health care for those who retired from the city, contributions, payments to other governments, GIS charges, and operating transfers out to other funds. For fiscal year 26, these expenditures decrease roughly 2%, which will be realized in the amount of funds that will be transferred to other funds. During fiscal year 25, the general fund, through the cost allocation plan, was required to repay the local street funds. A transfer is not required in fiscal year 26. Now we're moving on to the special revenue funds. And special revenue funds account for proceeds from specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes. Special revenue funds represent roughly 31% of the total citywide budget, equates to $62.5 million. These funds decrease in total by $17.09 million, or 22%. Starting on pages 131 to 157, you will find major and local street funds. Starting with the major street funds, the major street fund will realize a net increase of $1.37 million increase overall. This increase will be largely realized in an increase of projects planned citywide. Personnel also increases due to the across-the-board increases in salary and benefits. And to offset the increase in personnel services and operating services will be a decrease in planned capital outlay purchases and debt service payments for the year. The local street funds will be $3.76 million for fiscal year 26. This will be an increase of $1.52 million. The reason for the increase is due to city receiving the Saginaw County Road Millage Funds in the amount of $1.21 million. As a result, in receiving these funds, the Department of Public Services will be completing more construction projects as well as purchasing 2 plow trucks. On page 158 to 170, you will find the Rubbish Collection Fund. The Rubbish Collection Fund's budget will be $5.4 million for fiscal year 26. This is an increase of $228,834 from the prior budgeted fiscal year. For 2026, the household rubbish fee will remain the same as in the previous year at $240. On the expenditure side, the largest increase will be realized in capital outlay. This increase is due to including the purchase of 2 front-end packer trucks. Operating expenditures will increase $63,847. This is largely due to increases in general liability insurance costs and indirect costs. Miscellaneous expenditures will decrease $487 from the previous year, and this is due to a decrease in the debt service payment. Personnel services increases $29,553 due to the across-the-board increases to salaries and benefits. Starting on page 171 to 176, you will find the Public Safety Millage Fund. The Public Safety Millage Fund will be $3.69 million for fiscal year 26, and this is an increase of $429,092 from the previous fiscal year. This increase is due to an increase in real property tax revenues. Community Public Safety Police will continue to represent 68% of the budget, while Community Public Safety Fire is 32%. And as you can see from this chart here, to offset the increase in revenues will be the same increase to expenditures for salary and benefits for 20 police officers and 10 fire personnel. Please note that the levy was renewed in February of 2024. On pages 177 to 188, you will find the public safety grant funds. The total public safety grant funds for 2026 will be $61,817, and this represents a net decrease of $12,779. The police training grant is $15,000 for fiscal year 26, and this is a $1,000 increase. This increase is due to increase in the state grant for training and development. The Department of Justice will be $0 for fiscal year 26. The department is waiting on the release of funds, which will occur around September of the year. A budget adjustment will be completed at that time. The Saginaw County TAPS grant will decrease $1,779 for fiscal year 26. This reduction is attributed to a decrease in grant funds. In fiscal year 26, the police justice grant will be $0. This is because the grant was completed during fiscal year 25. On page 189 to 192, you will find the Clean Energy Coalition Fund. The Clean Energy Coalition Fund accounts for the projects that were provided and promotes clean energy technology within the city of Saginaw. The major source of revenue is a transfer from the general fund, which is in accordance with the terms of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The budget for fiscal year 26 will be $40,000. This is a reduction of $376 from the prior fiscal year. On pages 193 to 200, you will find the Anderson Enrichment Center and the Saginaw Arts and Enrichment Commission. The Anderson Enrichment Center is projected to be $104,000 for fiscal year 26. This is a $5,000 increase. This increase will be realized in personnel costs. The Arts and Enrichment Commission is projected to be $144,431. This is a $59,569 reduction from the previous year. This decrease is a result of a reduction in the number of donations that are expected to be received during fiscal year 26. On pages 201 to 204, you will find the TIFA, LDFA, DDA, and Brownfield authorities. The Brownfield Redevelopment Authority Fund will increase by $24,711 due to an increase in real property tax value within these districts. The DDA, Downtown Development Authority, 2011 revenues will be $188,820 for fiscal year 2026. This is a decrease of $731,267. This reduction is attributed to the completion of the $1 million grant from the State of Michigan Environmental Great Lakes Energy Remediation and Redevelopment Division for the facilitation and the redevelopment of a new riverfront high school campus in downtown Saginaw at 1741 North Niagara Street. Moving on to the Community Development Block Grant Funds. Community Development Block Grant Funds can be found on pages 205 to 222. Community Development Block Grant related funds will be $5.24 million for fiscal year 26. This represents an overall net increase of $220,965. CDBG fund will be $1.95 million for fiscal year 26. This is a decrease of $318,041. This reduction is due to a decrease in federal entitlement monies. CDBG residential loan funds will decrease $84,089. This reduction is due to a decrease in the amount of carry forward of funds from the prior year. The home program will be $2.07 million for fiscal year 26, and this represents a $487,605 increase. This increase is due to receiving home ARP grant dollars. The Saginaw Economic Development Loan Fund, budgeted at $576,990. This is an increase of $135,490 from the previous fiscal year. This increase is due to additional federal funds allocated for the program from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. On pages 222 to 226, you will find the National Opioid Settlement Fund. And new in fiscal year 25, the National Opioid Settlement Fund This fund accounts for funds received due to the National Opioid Settlement, which was a major legal agreement between the state and local governments and opioid manufacturers and distributors. The settlement was meant to compensate for the harm caused by the opioid crisis and will provide up to $26 billion for opioid prevention and treatment programs. On pages 223 to 226, again, is the National Opioid Settlement Fund. The budget for the fund will be $139,721. This is a reduction of $28,567. For fiscal year 26, the budget includes 90% of the Community Engagement Officer for Community Public Safety Fire, as well as a City Council approved contract for Community Public Safety Police with Saginaw County Community Mental Health to provide services. On pages 227 to 229, you will find the American Rescue Plan Fund, or ARPA. The American Rescue Plan Fund was established to account for American Rescue Plan grant dollars. The City of Saginaw, through the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, was allocated $52 million. These funds were allocated to assist states, local, tribal, and territorial governments in responding to the pandemic. This fund will decrease over $28.93 million from the previous fiscal year. This reduction is due to the completion of council-approved activities. And again, a budget adjustment will occur throughout 26 to represent various areas that are still working on their projects. On pages 230 to 231, you will find the State of Michigan Downtown Saginaw Medical Facility Fund. This fund is to recognize grant funds received in fiscal year 24 from the State of Michigan 2024 Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity Grant. This initial grant allocation is $30.3 million to implement critical infrastructure improvements for the development of a medical facility and to improve the health of the city of Saginaw. For fiscal year 26, this fund will be budgeted at $21.27 million. These funds will be allocated towards breaking ground on the project. On pages 232 to 233, you will find the Unfunded Liability Fund. The Unfunded Liabilities Fund will be $178,000 for fiscal year 26, which is the same as in the previous fiscal year. These funds are additional funds allocated to the city's OPEB obligation. On pages 234 to 236, you will find the Capital Project Fund. The Capital Project Fund accounts for the financial resources that are used for long-term investment projects requiring large sums to acquire, develop, improve, and/or maintain capital assets. Generally, revenues are received through transfers from the general, streets, and rubbish collection funds. For fiscal year 26, the budget will be $3.49 million, and this represents a decrease. And this decrease will be recognized in the funds allocated towards debt service payments, as well as a reduced allocation for the City Hall renovation project. Now moving on to enterprise funds. Enterprise funds account for services provided to the public on a user charge basis. The total amount of these funds is $85.36 million, or roughly 42% of the total citywide budget. These funds will decrease approximately 15%, or $14.5 million from the previous budgeted year. Starting on page 237 to 239, you will find the Boat Launch Fund. The Boat Launch Fund will be $25,000 for fiscal year 26, which is the same as the previous fiscal year. On pages 240 to 259, you will find the Sewer Operation and Maintenance Fund. Sewer Operation and Maintenance funds will decrease $4.11 million for a total of $34.17 million. This decrease is due to reduction in planned capital purchases and capital improvements, as well as debt service payment. In addition, to offset the reduction in this fund, there will be increases to the following: chemicals, engineering services, motor pool charges, general liability insurance premium costs, information management charges, and indirect allocation costs. Further, during fiscal year 25, the city was preliminarily awarded a multi-year Clean Water State Revolving Fund grant in the amount of $18.82 million. As mentioned in the sewer and water presentation from Mike Grenier, the Director of Water and Wastewater Services, these funds will be utilized for system improvements, and various capital projects will occur until the funding is officially awarded. For a more detailed explanation of the changes in this fund, please refer to the presentation created by Mike Grenier and Phil Carwa on the Sewer and Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. On pages 257 to 273, you will find the Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. The Water Operation and Maintenance Fund will decrease $10.38 million for a total of $51.17 million. This decrease is due to a reduction in the planned capital purchases and capital improvements projects, as well as the debt service payments. In addition, to offset the reduction in this fund, there will be increases to the following: chemicals, engineering services, motor pool charges, general liability insurance premium costs, information management charges, and indirect cost allocation costs. Further, during fiscal year 2025, the city was preliminarily awarded a multi-year drinking water state revolving fund grant in the amount of $18.8 million. As mentioned in the sewer and water presentation from Mike Grenier, the Director of Water and Wastewater Services, these funds will be utilized for system improvements, and various capital projects will occur until the fund is officially awarded. For more detailed explanation of the changes in this fund, please refer to the presentations created by Mike Grenier and Phil Carwatt on the Sewer and Water Operation and Maintenance Fund. Moving on to the internal service funds. Internal service funds accounts for goods and services provided to one department by another on a cost reimbursement basis. Internal service funds can be found from pages 274 through pages 307, and this chart shows breakdowns of each internal service fund within the city. The total budget for this fund type equates to $10.73 million. This is an increase of $856,218 from the previous year. Beginning on page 274 to 278, you will find the Public Works Building Fund. This fund expenditures are used to maintain the Public Works building for those divisions and departments that reside in the facility. The main source of revenues for this fund is fees for services or rents that are charged to the divisions that occupy space in the building. The budget for this year will be $641,615. This is an increase of $28,899 from the previous year. This is a result of an increase in personnel costs and general liability insurance premium costs. Moving on to the Department of Technical Services. There are two funds that are a part of the Technical Services Department: Geographical Information Systems, also known as GIS, and Information Services, which is IS. Beginning on page 279 to 283, you'll find Technical Services GIS. Technical Services GIS Fund is projected to be $392,429 for fiscal year 26. This is a net increase of $17,316 from the previous fiscal year. This net increase in this fund is primarily attributed to an increase in salary and benefits across the board. A reduction of training and development offsets this increase, as staff will not be attending the GIS World Conference. On pages 284 to 287, you will find Technical Services IS. Technical Services Information Services Fund generates revenues mostly through the charge for services for the maintenance and support for all computers, computer software, phones, and printers. A small amount of the revenues come from sales. Revenues for these charges will be $2.22 million for fiscal year 26. This represents an increase of $65,792 from the prior year. This increase is attributed to the purchase of computer software and for the lease on the central network switch for City Hall. On pages 288 to 291, you'll find the Radio Operation Fund. The Radio Operation Fund generates revenues through fees charged to user departments for maintaining and replacing radios. Revenues received in this fund will allow for the city to acquire, install, maintain two-way radio equipment. The total Radio Operation Fund will be $177,665 for fiscal year 26. This is an increase of $51,866. This increase is largely due to recognizing depreciation costs for the purchase of the new radio system in fiscal year 24. On pages 292 to 297, you'll find the Motor Pool Operation Fund. The Motor Pool Operation Fund accounts for the acquisition and maintenance of vehicles and other motorized equipment. The only exception is the fire department, which requires specialized services for their trucks. The Motor Pool Operation Fund will increase $278,843 from the prior fiscal year. This increase will be realized in increases to the motor vehicle supplies, motor vehicle repair costs, as well as the purchase of a shop truck through the Michigan Municipal Buyback Replacement Program. On pages 298 to 302, you'll find the self-insurance fund. The self-insurance fund accounts for the repayment of insurance premiums and records the insurance claims, liabilities, and distribution of insurance costs to other city funds. The self-insurance fund for 2026 is projected to be $2.66 million. This is an increase of $381,304, which is due to increasing insurance costs from the national market because of nationwide economic conditions. On pages 303 to 307, you will find the Workers' Compensation Fund. The Workers' Compensation Fund's revenues are based on a percentage of gross wages for all full-time employees. The city utilizes the median of the industrial rate to determine the percentage to assess to each employee by job classification. Saginaw Bay underwriters assist the city with determining these rates. Revenues for this fund type will be $1.45 million. The total fund will increase $32,198 for fiscal year 26. This increase is due to a higher appropriation of funds for settlements and judgments. Moving on to the last fund type, this is the fiduciary fund. The fiduciary fund accounts for the administration of property or assets are owned by other entities besides the city. The total of all fiduciary funds is projected to be $34,910 and is found in the cemetery endowment funds. The cemetery endowment funds accounts for legally restricted resources. 25% of cemetery revenues collected in the general fund are split and recognized in these funds. These revenues can only be used for cemetery care purposes in accordance with the city charter. For fiscal year 26, these funds are $34,910. And this is the same as what we projected in the prior year. As you can see, we presented the proposed 2026 budget. If you have questions, please feel free to either contact the city manager's office at 989-759-1403 or contact me directly at 989-759-1784 or email ybland@saginaw-mi.com. Thank you.